Everybody ready? Good morning. Welcome to this July 16th Commonwealth Transportation Board meeting, and we're going to begin with our workshop. So welcome and appreciate everybody being here today. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. As you can see, we're in a bit of transition here this morning. We have a couple of new members of the board who are not able to be here, but have joined the board, and they've been announced, and so we'll have them shortly. Unfortunately, Captain Byers has had a death in his family, and he's not here with us today because of that. So we will, I've reached out to him and sent him your best wishes and prayers, and so hopefully we'll have him back in September, which will be our next meeting. With that, I'm going to start this with the first agenda item, the develop and deliver results. Mr. Bart Thrasher, good morning, sir. How are you today?
Very well, sir. How are you?
You're looking well, thank you. Thanks for being here. So this morning, I'm giving you an update that I normally do every year, usually in July, and it's on the on-time, on-budget performance of both our localities and VDOT administered projects. And again, this is something that we do every year. And so I know that we have some newer members on the board, so I've tried to cut down on the acronyms and try to make sure I hone in on what the important items are. So it's the project development side of the house is our engineering. We will look at FY24 project development results. And all of our data is preliminary at this point in time. We just took it off our dashboard as of July the 8th. So what I would like for you to take away from this morning's presentation is our on-time, on-budget numbers for the past fiscal year continue to improve for both VDOT and locally administered projects. We're looking at positive results in both our construction arenas and our engineering side of the house. Results for statewide, all targets were achieved. That's both, our statewide is both VDOT and locally combined. VDOT results, all targets were achieved. Our locality results were 2 out of the 4 targets were achieved. Now, you may not think that's a good portion, it's only 50%, but in the past 2 years, they've been 1 out of 4. So we are showing definitive progress in that arena. And we're seeing impacts of that because of our close relationships and partnerships that we have formulated with the localities over the past 2 years with our the CTB policy we passed back in October and their engagement with localities over the past 2 years. And I'll get into that in just a few more slides. So this slide is just a slide that shows project development and project delivery. Again, that is on time and on budget. The numbers in red are from FY23. The orange bar for each graph shows what our target is. So statewide, again, means both VDOT and our locality scores. And in FY23, you will see that our performance targets, we made 3 out of 4. And this year we are 4 out of 4. So we are moving in a good direction. The next slide shows performance metrics as broken down into 2 categories, on time and on budget. All projects, again, are localities and VDOT. The project development, which is on the left-hand side, is our engineering side of the house. Our project delivery on the right-hand side is our construction side of the house. The top row, again, VDOT and localities. The middle row is just VDOT administered projects. And the bottom row is locality administered projects only. The black line on each subcategory represents the current performance metric for that category. Overall, all projects statewide, again, we have achieved our performance metrics. In 2023, we were 3 out of 4, and in 2022, we were 2 out of 4. For VDOT projects, we have hit all 4 of our targets. We hit all 4 of our targets both in 22 and in 23. Finally, our localities, we were 1 out of 4 in both 23 and 22. So again, we are showing a positive movement in both in our locality program. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. So a little more detail about the individual projects. So on this slide, I want you to focus on the fact that this is both for FY23 and 24 on the left-hand side. This just shows you the number of projects that we've had in 23 versus 24, and the amount of projects dollar-wise that were budgeted for that period. So you'll notice in 23, the number was 398 with 1.8, and in 2024, it's 392 with 2.7. So that's a pretty dramatic increase in the dollar-wise, not so much increase in the number-wise. So for VDOT managed projects in FY23, we're at roughly $1.5 billion. And in FY24, that went to $2.2 billion. Again, a significant increase. That's about a $600 million increase with a 39% percentage-wise. Locally managed projects, that increased from 315 to 531, and that's about a $216 million. And again, that's about the 69% increase. So what we're seeing this because we are putting bigger, larger projects into the plan. These larger projects are larger dollars. So that's why you're not seeing a big increase in the number, but you're seeing a big increase in the dollars. Larger projects, larger dollars for that, and that's why the increase. Again, statewide results for project development. This slide just illustrates that. You can see that we were 81 last year and 80 this year. 82 last year for on budget and 80 for this year. So pretty consistent numbers from one year to the next. The next slide is our trend analysis, and this just shows our numbers from FY19 through FY 2024. The on-time numbers are in blue. You can see the legend at the top. On-time percent is in blue, on budget is in orange. The on-budget numbers have been steady over the past 3 years, and our on-time numbers have been steady over the last 2 years. Now, what you're looking at 69%, from 69 to 81. That encompasses our paving projects back in FY 2022, where we went back and reassigned the start dates for these projects. We started them with notices to proceed the first day of April. And that's been different from our policy over the years. We usually had that spread out over April and May. We wanted more time started in the early start of the stages that gave our contractors more time to work. So that's why you're seeing the number go down and then jump up from 69 to 81. Our paving projects historically are in the upper 90s on time, on budget. VDOT project development, you can see from FY23 to FY24 that we decreased, and our on time and our budget on was increased by 4%. This doesn't, I don't think this is anything to be concerned about. Our numbers are back where they were beforehand. 91%, 93% back in 2022. The 81% lines back up with FY20 through FY22. So again, I think these numbers are consistent with what we've seen in the past. Locally project development. And here you're going to see that the on-time numbers have increased from 73 to 78, and the on-budget numbers decreased from 72 to 61. The rationale, we believe, for the on-time increase, that's the impact of VDOT's Local Sustained Performance Program. And we think that's a program that the board passed back in October, that we look at and implemented this over the last 2 to 3 years. The program is directed towards those localities that have the highest impact on the performance of VDOT's 6-year plan. The policy directs the department to perform and evaluate annually on these different localities. Work with these localities that are deficient in performance metrics defined by the department to direct and look at corrective actions. So we're seeing some of that. It's been only 2 years, but we're starting to see a direct correlation of that. What about the number between 72 down to 61%? Localities, when they add on scope to a project in construction by change order, their monies that come to that are their monies. And we're seeing a lot of that, where they're actually putting a change order to a construction project, and then that makes that project, they don't go back and re-baseline it. So the project goes over the fixed completion date. We're also seeing the fact that the competition that's coming in from the contractors. A lot of the contractors are not going after the locality projects simply because of the magnitude of the VDOT projects and the VDOT program that we're putting out. So localities are getting stiffer competition, and they're starting to reflect that in some of the actual numbers they're getting from contractors.
Mr. Trasher,
Sir.
is there a way to not the second part where the competition is creating this problem, but where we change a project, or they change a project in this case, and then we say it's not on time. Well, if I'm going to do like a house renovation, and it's going to be done by September, and my wife adds the kitchen, like, and it's going to be done by November, and it's done by November, it's on time, right? Like, if it's January, February, it's not. And so is there, and you don't have to answer this now. I didn't hear this before when we talked about these numbers. But I think there's, obviously, we don't want to call something that we made a decision to change the scope of it not on time because we just don't change the time and call ourselves deficient. We don't want to do that. So there might be a way to back some of that data out of here so that, if we legitimately change the project and it's going to add scope to it and it's going to add time to it, then when we get to the original time, elapsed time, we say, all right, we're over time. Well, I just don't subscribe to that as a concept.
When we're aware of that, sir, we do re-baseline that.
You do, when you're aware.
When we're aware.
Okay, fine. I took a long time to get that answer. It was really quick. Thank you. Sir.
Curious on the,
Mr. Lawson, I apologize.
no, that's fine, thank you. On budget, how much is this is due to the budget being set a year or
Earlier.
two earlier? Now
Yeah.
we're
Yes, sir.
in an inflationary.
That is an impact to it, sir, yes. How much, I can't answer that, but yes, it is an impact.
But typically, like if we were looking at a local project and we're looking at stuff that's going on, how far back would the budget have been set?
Several
A few years, yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So a few years, Mr. Lawson, to your point. And listen, that's different, right? Extraordinary inflation is real, and you got to pay it, but it's not performance, right? If I'm still performing at the level I wanted to perform at and just the world changed, that doesn't change my performance. I bid it at $10, and 3 years later, that $10 is 15. I can't help that, right? There's nothing, in theory, there's nothing I could have done. And so it is what it is, right? And we don't want to penalize them we want to know about it. Like, it's going to cost that real money, but we don't want to penalize them as if they did something poorly. And that's the point I think you're making. Yes, sir. Mr. Stanton.
These budget percentages treat $2,000 sidewalk project the same as they treat a $3 billion tunnel project.
That's correct, sir.
I mean, if you have a cost overrun on a huge project, it counts the same.
That is correct. We have to keep that in focus, yes, sir.
The percentages aren't based on the dollars, they're based on the units.
Correct.
Mr.
Have you
Stanton.
ever analyzed the total budget?
I've not. But I mean, it's a good point, right? If I got a bunch of silly little, small, individual little projects and they're each a day late, right? And there's 10 of them, it has a huge impact on the numbers. But one project that's 100 days late, that's huge, is the same. It's the same, yeah. So it does,
Mr. Secretary?
yes, ma'am.
With the drop in on budget, is this the same localities getting worse, or are these new localities going into the red on the dashboard?
In some instances, yes, in some instances, no. It could be new ones, but there are some that are repeats, yes.
Mr. Commissioner, this might be a good time to talk about, or maybe you want to finish this up, but, we went back and set this policy, obviously, because we had some problems with certain localities that were struggling. And so we set this policy. More important than the policy, frankly, is the fact that we went and worked with them. We said, how can we help you get to where we need you to get? And what do we need to do to help you? And I think, Mr. Commissioner, you might be able to speak to that, or Bart, sir, speak to, we've had some progress and it's been a collaborative process, I guess is what I'm saying, and we're seeing progress. So we're happy about that.
You're seeing much more collaborative correlation between the districts and the localities now. I mean, the local sustain program it's only been under president for about 2 years, but we're starting to see the initial impacts of that collaboration. We're seeing that.
Mr. Secretary, I was going to hold the comments for the last slide for the next step, so I'd prefer that if we can get through here. I do think that there's a wrap-up to the
All right,
good
let's
news
go.
story.
Apologize, Mr. Engineer.
Yes, sir. Now we're going to go on the construction side. This slide just shows the statewide on-time delivery is up by 4% from FY23 for on-time, and then again for on budget. Again, this is a trend analysis. Again, we're headed in the right direction. We're going up from both 23 into 24 for both on budget and on time. This is statewide again, so this is both VDOT and localities. We are still seeing industry capacity issues across the state. Depending upon what side areas of the state, that may be more severe than others. We're seeing labor shortages. Again, that can be more severe in our more urban areas, Hampton Roads, Richmond, into the Northern Virginia areas. And we're still seeing material costs continue to escalate. So that's reflective in what we're seeing from the contracting side of the house. VDOT project delivery trends, again, we're holding steady from 23 to 24. That 77 to 89% number, again, was our paving contracts back in 2022, reflective of earlier notices to proceed. Locally delivery trends, again, moving in the right direction from 23 to 24. Locality Sustained Performance Program, again, is having benefits that we're seeing. The 91% is more along the lines of what I'm used to seeing, pretty consistent over the last 4 or 5 years, as well as the 58, at least that's been consistent between 53 to 58%. So next steps. So overall, our statewide program continues to improve, both from the localities and VDOT. And we're good to see that. That's what we want to see. We're seeing sustained improvement in the local program, and that's what we want to see. In the past years, those numbers have not been reflective of what we want to see in a local program. Next month, and I think it's in September, we'll provide a more detailed update on the local sustained program. So I will defer to the commissioner.
Mr. Secretary, if I might, just to be able to follow up with what the chief engineer has indicated. So next month, what you'll see is an update on the local sustainability performance program. And this is where we would give you the results of the report cards for each of the localities that we talked about last year. So as the chief engineer said, officially the policy's only been in place for a year, coming up in October. We have been working very collaboratively with the localities for 2 years when we started talking about and conceiving the policy. So this, I think we're at a very good inflection point from the data that we're seeing. We're relatively new to the program and the process, and although our district engineers and our staffs have been very collaborative with the localities in the past, there's a lot more collaboration and emphasis being placed on time and on budget performance. I'll say that I would also say thank you to a number of the board members that have reached out and worked with our district engineers to be able to meet with some of those localities. Just recall, last year we had 15 localities that were not performing up to the standards that I would expect. I think what you're going to see this year is that some of those localities are coming off or on the pinnacle of coming off of that list. We've seen a lot of good improvements on new projects that have gone in where there's a lot more emphasis on those. They're still recovering from some of those legacy projects that have been in the works and overcoming some of those other difficulties that they've had. So I think this is a good news story that and very positive. There'll be a lot more information at the September board meeting, which just so happens to couple with the local programs workshop that we have with the localities, so that hopefully you'll be able to watch the interaction. I think this is one of the best conferences that we do put on. It's a training program for the localities and allows localities, contractors, consultants, and VDOT staff to be able to have a very positive dialogue on new trends, issues that come up, and troubleshooting of those, but also talk about the successes that we've had in the delivery of our program. So I look forward to that, to the September workshop and looking at our performance program and our results in the report card to show what progress we have made in a very short period of time. But I think we're on the right trend. We just need to keep up the work that we're doing in the collaborative efforts with the localities. They are a very strong partner in the delivery of our program, as you can see by those numbers that the chief engineer showed initially.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Ms. Sellers?
Could
Ms.
we-
Secretary.
Could we possibly see, especially the localities that are in the red, could we maybe get word of that before we come into the public meeting?
No problem. I think we'll be able,
You'll see it in your package, I think, too.
we'll get the report card out in advance, yes. It's still in the development. We're in the year-end close. We need to pull that data together over the next 45, 60 days.
And listen, folks, we need to be, listen, we're pushing on them, as we should. But to our earlier points about on time, on budget and what that really means, and we need to be thoughtful about that and make sure we're pushing on the right places. And we're going to celebrate those folks that are doing well. I will tell you that in our pre-session, the chief engineer and I had great joy in discussing goals that are in the 80s or 70s versus in the 90s, where I like to be. So we're going to continue to push, within reason, to get people up to a pretty high number here by giving them assistance and giving them encouragement and trying to make sure our processes work well. But they can't control inflation, nor can we. And if somebody changes the scope of a project, we ought to try to reflect that, as chief engineer said. So, you encouraged?
Yeah.
Look
Mr.
forward to going.
Secretary.
Dr. Smoot.
I think this really is, as the commissioner intimated, a place where CTB members, and particularly district representatives, can be helpful. We had a locality that was not covering itself nor the Commonwealth in glory with its performance here. And the district engineer and I went to visit with them. We had a little prayer meeting. And as a result of that,
And your prayers were answered.
yeah, well, we went into it with considerable trepidation of, how we might be received. And the fact is that we were very well received, and it enabled those who were responsible for administering projects to get some additional staffing support from the city council budget appropriation to be able to do this work better.
Great.
And they have really turned it around. So I think each of us has the opportunity in our districts when something like that happens to be a part of reaching out. And I was just really pleased with how well it was received.
So should we call you the Reverend Dr. Smoot?
Yes, that'd be fine.
Mr. Chairman, or
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Secretary,
Commissioner.
if I might add, recognizing that a lot of this conversation has been focused on the local program. The local program, as you saw, is only a component. Rest assured that we continue to challenge VDOT's district engineers, the chief engineer on the delivery of our program. As of last week, we had the same conversation about our metrics and where we want to see it in improving on those metrics. I'm not going to change those metrics for today, but we continue to highlight the importance of on-time, on-budget performance in delivery of our program in a very timely manner. So I don't want you to lose sight or lack of focus from the department's end on this. We are challenging our staffs as we speak right now on how we can deliver the program faster and continue to be able to meet our on-time and on-budget performance metrics and increase what we have done to date. I think the chief engineer can just shake his head yes and agree.
Laser focus, sir.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
So-
Commissioner. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
The next item on our agenda is item number 2, the review of the location decision for the Martinsville Southern Connector, and I'm going to steal a little bit of Mr. Swanson's thunder as he comes up and briefs us on this. A few years back, let me rephrase. So, with more than a decade here at CTB and also almost a dozen years at Redevelopment Housing Authority in Norfolk, I had the I had a lot of involvement with condemnation. I think the NRHA is the second largest condemner in the state, only behind VDOT. And so I've been involved in it a lot, and and I've been at my own property condemned by VDOT. And it's not a fun process, folks. And Mr. Kasperitz and others drew our attention to that anomaly or that situation when a location decision's been made and your property is in the way of that location, that if you sit there for 10 or 15 or 20 years with a sort of a location that's been designed but is maybe never going to get built, you really tarnish the ability of the landowner to do things with their property. And that's a problem. And I'm not against condemnation in the proper setting and when it needs to be done for the public good. But I am against hurting people unnecessarily and having them twist in the wind. So Mr. Kasperitz and others have pushed that as a policy. And so now we have a policy that we go and review those location decisions every 3 years. It doesn't mean we get rid of them after 3 years. It means we review them after 3 years and decide whether they're still applicable or not, which is a great way to do it, frankly. And if it's still applicable and we still think it needs to be there, then we'll let it remain there. And if we don't, we'll take it off and let the property owners do with the property what they want to do with their property. That's part of being American. And so, thank you and others who push this, and that's what brings us to here today, Mr. Swanson.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. As the Secretary was just mentioning, that policy that was developed and approved was dated September 2022. That's what prompts us to review these with you and make a recommended path forward. We have two that I'll be going over today. The first one will be the Martinsville Southern Connector, Route 220, and that decision was dated January 15th, 2020. So just in terms of background, you'll see throughout the presentation I've referred to the Martinsville Southern Connector as MSC. Those efforts date back to 2016 when federal earmarks were used to advance the MSC study. And in 2018, the department initiated an environmental impact statement, which ultimately resulted in the CTB identifying a location for the project in January 2020, which was identified as Alternative C from the EIS. That's an important distinction that I'll make here and further into the presentation in terms of recommendations. But as the board identified Alternative C within the draft EIS, the board also prompted the department to further evaluate ways to reduce impacts to that Alternative C that was identified. And in February 2020, the Federal Highway Administration issued that draft EIS that included Alternative C. And in issuance of the final environmental impact statement, the document did incorporate that modified Alternative C, which was a direct result of the CTB's direction to identify an alternative that could reduce impacts. Again, I'll get more into that throughout the presentation. So knowing that there are several new members to the board, just want to kind of set the stage, if you will, when we have done these location decision reviews for the previous three that we've already completed. We like to go over the purpose and need as well as some of the impacts that are associated with the different alternatives that were evaluated. So for the purpose and need for the MSC, the purpose was to enhance mobility for both local and regional traffic traveling along Route 220 between the North Carolina state line and Route 58 near Martinsville. Some of the needs that were to be addressed were to accommodate regional and local traffic and to address geometric deficiencies and inconsistencies. So here is a quick table of estimated impacts that came from the different analyses that were used to develop the alternatives. Again, if you see the asterisk on Alternative C, that is what was included in the draft EIS, and it was what the board took action on in terms of its location and decision. Subsequently, the preferred alternative became the modified Alternative C, but it was not reflected in this board's decision, knowing that it had already been completed back in 2020. And you can see the charge was met from the board to reduce impacts. If you just look at those two columns on the right-hand side, to further reduce those impacts. So since the final EIS was issued, funding for the next phase of the project was identified and committed to by the board in July 2021. The board has approved safety improvements on the southern portion of Route 220 from the state line to mile marker 3. And then there's an ongoing study for innovative intersection designs and modifying access along 220 between Route 58 and Route 87 to improve safety and traffic operational flow. That's anticipated to be completed by later this year. So VDOT's recommendation, or the department's recommendation, is to affirm the previous decision, given the current efforts that continue to ongo in this area along 220 and alike. But we would also recommend that you modify the location decision to appropriately incorporate the modified alternative C, as it is not currently reflected in your location decision. And those are based on the corridor continues to advance refinements and look to improve safety options throughout the corridor.
Swanson, can you go back to slide 3, please?
Yes.
We're going back to slide 3?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Slide
I thought you
3.
said the last slide,
No,
sorry.
slide 3.
There you go.
There you go, okay. So, as you see in your package, this is the map, and the green was the alternative C that we referenced that we approved in 2020. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And when we did that, we also advised them to go and find us, make it better, if you will. And he showed us the table where they've made it better. And so now, what he's asking us to consider in this presentation is to modify that location decision to reflect the preferred alternative as opposed to the green line, which was alternative C. That's correct.
Correct.
Okay, so that's what we're being briefed on. We're not taking action on this here in this meeting, but that's the briefing. So we've asked them to reduce some impacts. They went back and looked at ways to reduce impacts, came back to us, and are recommending that as the way to reduce impacts, but still meet the purpose and need. Is that correct?
Correct. And the action would be taking place at the September meeting. I should clarify that.
Correct, correct. Questions? All right. Watch, Ms. Swanson. Item number 3 is a review location decision for I-73 Henry County alternative. Number 2.
Go. Okay. We are under that same policy from September 2022. We're reviewing the next location decision that we have in front of us is the I-73 corridor and the Henry County alternative location. We're presenting it as one recommended action, but there are actually 2 location decision on file that we need to review and recommend an action on, and I'll get to that throughout this presentation. But 2 that we are aware of are the I-73 corridor decision dated May 17, 2001, and then the Henry County Alternative, or HCA, which modified limited portions of I-73 within Henry County of Virginia. And this slide does a little bit better job of describing that. So in May 2001, CTB identifies locations for the I-73 corridor, and in March 2007, the Federal Highway Administration issued their ROD for that corridor of study. In June 2008, Henry County requests and the CTB directs the department to evaluate an alternative alignment for that specific portion of the I-73 corridor that resides within Henry County. So in December 2009, CTB directs VDOT to complete the NEPA efforts for that HCA. And in 2011, the CTB amended its location approval to adopt that portion of alignment within Henry County, or the HCA. So subsequently, the Federal Highway issued their FONSI for the HCA portion of the I-73 corridor. So here's just a quick graphical depiction of those 2 locations. On the left is the entire I-73 corridor, from the North Carolina line all the way north up to the Roanoke area, and it's depicted in red. And then if you look to your right, you will see the Henry County alternative, which is a subset to the larger corridor. And you can see on the right-hand side, there is a gray corridor, which is depicted as I-73. That is the original corridor that was identified from the graphic on your left. The red line on the HCA graphic is that modified Henry County alternative, which was amended by the board after the I-73 corridor was established through a location decision. So again, just keeping in precedent with the other location decisions, the purpose and need was to improve the safety of movement and goods and people along the Teutonic Corridor, provide for economic growth, economic vitality, and maintenance of existing economic competitiveness in the study area, improve operations and access and capacity for vehicular and freight movement, and enhance general mobility and transportation linkage in the study area. And it was also to address congressional intent for the high priority corridor. In terms of estimated impacts, I've narrowed this down really because it's a little bit of a, with the Henry County alternative, I just simply wanted to show the I-73 corridor impacts and then the impacts within Henry County that were associated with the larger corridor, and then going in at the direction of the board to evaluate just that Henry County alternative. You can see how those impacts vary between the larger I-73 corridor study and then the specific Henry County alternative study. So actions that have been taking place since the CTB's location decisions, no funding has been identified to advance either decision, the I-73 or the HCA. And there were federal earmarks for the I-73 corridor, and those were repurposed in 2016. Some of the efforts or money that were used for those earmarks were access management projects along the corridor, the Route 220 Artillery Management Plan, which has been completed, and then the Martinsville Southern Connector Study, which we just discussed. So given this information, the department is recommending that the board rescind the May 2001 decision for the larger I-73 corridor and the June 2011 decision for the Henry County alternative. And this is based on the need for a reevaluation of a final EIS or a new EIS, which would be followed by a ROD from the Federal Highway Administration, and then funding needed to demonstrate fiscal constraint. So with that, I'll open it to questions.
Anyone have any questions?
Mr. Secretary, I want to express appreciation to people in VDOT and your office for looking at these two projects and trying to find a workable way forward, which I think has been done. I know we're not voting on this today, but in conversations both with civic leadership in the area there and several of their legislators, I find awareness that I-73, and I would even say any new interstate, is unlikely to be built in any kind of foreseeable future, and that looking at ways that we can enhance transportation in ways that are perhaps fundable in the future and address much of the issues that are trying to be addressed is a good resolution. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smoot. Yeah, this 73 concept is almost 35 years old now. And you know, it's not that it's a bad concept, or it would be great to have a lot of these things that we have, or that we'd like to have, but you got to be able to get there, right? And in the meantime, people twist in the wind. So here we are. Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Swanson.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Next item on the agenda is the Powhite Parkway project. Mr. Smizik, how are you this morning? Welcome. Talk about the Parkway.
Yes, sir. We're here to present VDOT's involvement in Chesterfield County's Powhite Parkway project. Before we start talking about VDOT's involvement, provide a little bit of context to the area and what the county has going on. For the last few decades, the county's planning has led to some sizable transportation improvements in this area, which have then fed into residential growth. In 1971, the first segment of Powhite Parkway was constructed, with the final segment coming in 1980. You'll see the parkway extending out of the right side of the map there towards the top. And in 1989, State Route 288 was constructed and opened, and that runs north to south and intersects Powhite there on the right-hand side. Those connections to the surrounding metropolitan area, coupled with the county's investment in local roads, led to the major residential growth that has occurred there over the last few decades, highlighted by the Wood Lake and Brander Mill communities on either side of the reservoir on the graphic. The county continues to plan and advance transportation improvements and opportunities to bring jobs to the area. We highlight the Upper Magnolia Green site on this map. The 2,000-acre property was purchased by the county in 2020 with the intent of bringing manufacturing or other office jobs to this area. The county also continues to look for ways to improve connections to the surrounding metropolitan area and reduce congestion on its residential streets. To accomplish these goals, their plans include expanding and extending existing road networks and looking for new roadways when appropriate. One ways the county is looking to advance this is with widening of the Powhite Parkway. The county is underway with design for this phase that would extend from Charter Colony Parkway to Woolridge Road, highlighted by the orange bar on the screen. The level of environmental review required for this project does not necessitate VDOT's engagement. Since the 80s, county plans have also called for the extension of Powhite Parkway the whole way down to Hull Street or US 360, which runs east to west, kind of towards the bottom of that blue oval. Because the county intends on seeking federal funds for this project, that elevates the level of environmental review, and that is where VDOT's involvement is triggered. We don't have an alignment yet to illustrate for this segment. The environmental review process will help identify that alignment, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. But before we did, wanted to identify a few other independent projects in the area the county is advancing along the Powhite corridor to improve safety and access to and from the corridor to the local road network. It's been at least 4 or 5 years since we've brought a new NEPA project to this board, so we wanted to take a step back maybe and introduce a few of the terms that we'll be using in the next couple of months. I mentioned environmental review, and when we talk about federal funds for environmental review, we're talking about the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. In terms of VDOT, when federal highway funds are applied to a project, NEPA must be complied with. There are varying levels of NEPA documents. The two that are important to our discussions on Powhite are an environmental assessment, or EA, and an environmental impact statement, or EIS. When it is unsure if significant impacts will occur as a result of a project, an EA is completed. And when there are known or presumed significant impacts for a project, an EIS is required. The multi-alternative EAs and EISs are by far the most complex NEPA document, and that's what often triggers VDOT's involvement in these projects. The board's involvement in the NEPA process is highlighted on this slide, the code reference with your authority to identify locations. VDOT will return to the board to seek a location for the preferred alternative, would then be documented in the NEPA document. To ensure information it needs to make that decision, we have a 5-step process we'll walk through you with in the next few months. We're here today to introduce the study, and we'll return this fall to introduce the purpose and need, or the goals for the project. Early next year, we'd come back to introduce the range of alternatives that will be considered in the EIS. And if we hit those marks, we'd be back next summer to present the findings of the analysis and make a recommendation for a preferred alternative. Some background into the work that's gone on so far. In April 2023, VDOT and the county executed a project agreement for VDOT to administer the NEPA process for the Powhite project extending from Wool Ridge Road to Hall Street. We initiated work on the NEPA process, specifically agency involvement, and through that agency involvement, we began to hear federal agencies suggest that they believed significant impacts could occur as a result of this project. So while our initial project agreement had assumed an EA, those comments began to suggest an EIS was appropriate. And after counsel with Federal Highway and the county and updating our agreement documents the spring of this year, the county, Federal Highway, and VDOT formally agreed that an EIS was the appropriate level of NEPA document. It's too early to speak yet to the alternatives that will be considered in the EIS, but I can speak a bit to the scope. The EIS will consider a reasonable range of alternatives within the study area on the slide. Those alternatives will include improvements to existing road network, new roadway alignments, and examine how transit and other efficiencies can be applied to these alternatives. Alternatives that are found to meet the purpose and need would be retained for detailed analysis in the EIS. Closing, these are the upcoming touch points with this board. We'll provide more information and then seek your action. As always, this schedule is subject to change depending on how the NEPA process advances. Thank you for your time. Welcome any questions you might have.
Mr. Gaspard.
We'll go back to the slide. Yes, that one actually. So I know the consider reasonable range of alternatives with including improvements of existing roadways. That's pretty obvious. New roadway alignments as well. Transit and other efficiencies. I see no reference to multimodal options in this. Is that third bullet a catch-all for bike ped, bus transit, other transit options in the context of this EIS?
Correct, yes. So in the EIS, we would speak to transit as an option, and then we tend to lump the other groups together into transportation system management, transportation demand management, or TSM, TDM, which would take care of the bike ped, yes.
So as we look at this, the next major event is the completion of the purpose and needs statement. And that was, I think, shown in the fall. Let's go back to purpose and need. Yeah, fall of 2024. Does this board have visibility into the range of alternatives and the basis used to construct that purpose and need? And I say that in the context of my prior comments as it relates to multimodal activities.
Bring back our purpose and need. We will introduce the elements or the main headings, if you will, of what that purpose and need is, and explain how we worked with the federal and state agencies, you know, what necessitates that specific need, if you will. At that time, we will not have alternatives. It's a stepwise process, but when we come back then in early 2025, we would be able to show you all the alternatives that are being considered at that time and how we believe they do or do not meet the purpose and need.
No, I understand, but I guess when we see this again with the purpose and need discussion, the determination on purpose and need will have been made.
It's not, I would say to some extent, yes, we've come to agreement with the agencies, but there's also plenty of work to be done drafting the document, and it's not considered final until Federal Highway signs that document.
I understand. I guess the challenge, we've had this discussion before, that I have is we're ultimately going to be asked to make a decision on preferred alternative. And preferred alternatives, of course, spring from or come from the purpose and needs statement that starts this process. Again, I stress for this board that, you know, our scrutiny and involvement in that first step is critically important. And if we look back to the Martinsville engagement that we discussed earlier, one of the challenges for the board at that time was looking at the purpose and need and having had no input, then having the requirement to make a decision on preferred alternatives. So I guess I just stress, I'm not sure the answer to what I'm asking, but I stress that any board involvement or visibility into the development of the purpose and need is beneficial because we're ultimately going to be tasked with making the ultimate decision. Mr. Secretary, any thoughts on that?
I hear you, and I've been through that process before.
We have.
And you sort of get, you know, you start with an answer and then you work to the components of it. And so I share some of your concern. And we're working on it. Ms. Sellers?
Wouldn't the district rep be the person that would have the comments? I would think the district rep would be the one that, if there's somebody that had a comment.
I think
would
what we
start with
need-
the
what we
district
need-
rep, But not the
Yeah.
whole CTV.
Well, no, I mean, the whole CTB gets, we vote no matter what. The point is, the way the process sort of works, right? Mr. Smizik, can you explain, give us a little bit more detail on how the purpose and need comes to be agreed upon?
NEPA holds a monthly meeting with federal agencies who are involved in the NEPA process. Those are agencies like the Army Corps of Engineers who have another federal action to take as the project advances. So eventually the Army Corps will have to issue a permit for this project. So they have a stake in this. State agencies who have purview over these resources are invited as well as localities, in this case like Chesterfield County. Meet monthly, begin to identify need elements based on, in this case, county planning documents and public involvement for each step on the slide. There is a public involvement phase as well, so we're hearing from the public on what they think the needs for said project are. We will develop information to support or to disprove need elements as they may be, and then eventually seek concurrence from the federal agencies involved. In this case, it's the Army Corps of Engineers and the EPA. Their concurrence represents to Federal Highway that the other federal agencies are on board with that purpose and need being carried over into the NEPA document.
Mr. Casper's.
I guess it's somewhat clear that we have limited interaction in the development of the purpose and need. I would just encourage everyone involved in that to consider the multimodal aspects as one of the key components of that EIS. And I felt, and it could be misleading in the way that it's presented and wasn't intended to do so, but it got relatively light treatment in the identification of options for the development of the purpose and need. And I guess that's in Richmond District?
It is.
Yeah. I'd encourage my colleague to be especially focused in the development of this on the multimodal options as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Casper's. I will tell you that the blue, go back to slide 5. Yeah. The blue circle, the upper magnolia green, that's a lot of what this is about, right? We've got this opportunity to do some really good stuff, but it's not ready yet. So a lot of this has been about that for a number of years, is how to get that part of the county ready for, that's sort of where the county's headed. It's not us, it's the county. Yep, me too. Yes, sir, Mr. Coleman.
For those of us that don't live in the area, what is Upper Magnolia Green? Is that a commercial or residential?
No, it'd be a commercial development area. It's very large, yes, sir. And I'll tell you just for this is an aside and I'm digressing, but in the early 70s, Brander Mill, I think, was developed. I remember going there maybe in 72 or 73 because they had this incredible pool that they built, this indoor 50-meter pool, and I was a swimmer. So I remember going to Brander Mill and to swim, and it was just like this amazing place. And there was nothing around it. It was like out in the country. And now you got a Brander Mill, and it's like you're, sort of in the city. So it's interesting to watch the development down the 360 corridor. And this is just all part and parcel of that. Here we are, 50 years later. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Mr. Secretary,
Mr. Laird.
if there is on the existing, is there multimodal on the existing roadway?
Yeah, it depends on what roadway you're talking about. So
Well-
in this EIS study area, there's all sorts of stuff. But on the Powhite Parkway itself, it's not, it's not focused on bike ped.
So I appreciate that we want to consider multimodal, but if it's just isolated to a small portion, is that realistic?
I think, you know, I think when you look at any of these things, you just go in with all options on the table and your eyes wide open, and it's like being in a cafeteria, and you select the things that make sense for where you are and what you're trying to accomplish, and you figure out where you're trying to go, and then you go. And you know, whether you're building a bridge and what size of the bridge, or you're building a road and what you put on there, it's all the same. And you can't be everything to everybody, so you have to make those choices. So your point's well taken. But I don't think you rule anything in. Right, let me rephrase that. I don't think you rule anything out, right? And you start with that, and then you do what makes sense. That's a lay person's view of how it works. Anyone else? All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much. All right, the next item on the agenda is item number 5, our acting director, Zach Trogdon, who did a great job yesterday. We had the opportunity to be involved in a joint study committee that is studying transit in Northern Virginia, which is a huge area of work, and lots going on up there, lots of money and lots of stuff going on. But so I've been asked to sit on this committee, or been directed to sit on this committee by the resolution. Zach is on it as well, and he came and made a presentation yesterday to the senators and delegates and others that were on the committee to talk about transit in Northern Virginia. And that's all just by way of background to say thank you to Zach. We appreciate you filling this role for us, and you did a nice job yesterday.
Well, thank you.
So thank you. So welcome.
I have nothing to add beyond the report that's in their packet, so thank you.
Any questions? All right, thank you very much. Mr. Commissioner.
Mr. Secretary, I'm going to defer until September because we've got a lot of work to undertake between now and then when we're in Roanoke, as well as talking about the local program workshop.
Does that mean you went on vacation last week? Is that what that means? I think that's what I heard. Did anybody hear that? I heard that. Is that what you said?
My vacation is a fleeting memory
Yes,
at this
sir.
point, so.
Yes, sir, I understand that, and we appreciate everything you do. Anyone else? As I indicated earlier today, Mr. Folks is out of town, and Captain Byers has had a death in his family. We have 2 new members that will arrive and 2 others that are coming right behind them, so we will have a full complement in our next meeting in September.
The 2 names that have been, you said 2 names.
Some of them haven't. I'll give that to you later. I'm not sure if it's been fully announced or not, and I don't want to make the announcement. But they've been picked and they've been vetted and they're ready to go. You know, there's some work you got to do to get up to speed, and the economic interest, all those forms you got to fill out, and there's stuff that needs to be done. Yes, I'm familiar. I'm familiar as well. That's my point.
About those forms this morning.
Yeah.
We think they ought to be changed.
Well, Mr. Stant,
The economic.
Mr. Stant, you may want to run for the legislature, and you can go work on that, because we don't have the power.
Fill out the forms.
We don't have, thank you, that's what I decided. We don't have the power to do that here, and it's a good and necessary process. So we're happy to do it. So with that, that's going to conclude our workshop meeting. We have an action meeting that we're going to start. And Carol, are we going to start now and then adjourn, or lunch is a little bit off yet? So,
I would start the action meeting, then suspend it for.
yeah, we have the,
Yes.
I don't have the book.
Right here.
All right, so I'm adjourning the workshop meeting, and I'm going to call to order the action meeting. This is the July 16th action meeting of the Commonwealth Transportation Board, and the first item of our agenda is public comment. Is there anyone here that would like to speak? No public comment. Feeling really lonely up here. All right, hearing none. We have some minutes that were produced and sent out to the group in your package. Is there any, are there any comments or questions in the, about the minutes? If none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Ms. Sellers moves. Mr. Coleman seconds. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? All right, thank you very much. Mr. Hofrichter, good morning. How are you today?
I hope you are as well.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Appreciate you being here. Item number one, Mr. Hofrichter, the action on discontinuance of the primary system of state highways portion of Route 58 in Washington County, located in the Bristol District.
Yes, sir. This is a 1/10 of a mile portion of roadway, is rendered not needed for public use due to the relocation of Route 58 in that area. But we cannot abandon it because it does serve two properties, so it has to be maintained for them to be able to go in and out.
I don't know what that, can you explain what that means, Mr. Hofrichter?
Yes, sir. So this is
We discontinue it, but we don't abandon it.
Correct.
Okay, so will you explain what that means?
So in this case, it means that we will no longer maintain it, spend public funds to keep it up, but it's still open as a public way so that people can get into those properties.
So we own it. Somebody lives at the end of it. We don't maintain it anymore. It seems to me like that's sort of a, like,
It is indeed an in-between sort of situation, yes, sir.
what happens when there's huge potholes in the road?
Well, in those cases, the residents could apply for a permit and fill them in. In this case, the road is built to, primary standards. It would be a very long time before that sort of stuff happened.
But it's going to come.
Mr. Secretary,
Absolutely.
has there been any communication with the local governments and that are involved in this location?
Yes, sir.
And what is their take on it?
They support the discontinuance of this segment.
Let me back up a minute. And I should have asked this before now, but I didn't. What's the purpose? Is it just to get out of the maintenance business of a road that we own? I hate to say it that way, but is that what we're doing?
That is essentially it, sir. In this case, generally speaking, it's a primary highway right now, legally speaking. So we have to maintain it to primary standards. Since it only serves two parcels, that is excessive in terms of public involvement. And generally speaking, that ends up being a discontinuance. Now, the other option would be to, instead of making it a discontinuance, would be to transfer it to the secondary system and then maintain it as a secondary highway.
Why would you not do that? I guess I react to, okay, I own it. I'm not going to let you mess with it unless you get my permission to do it the way I want it. But I'm not going to maintain it. But it's still in the state, it's not in the system, but I own it. And you can't mess with it. Like, either we should own it and put it where it belongs and take care of it that way, or we shouldn't own it. I don't understand what owning it does if you're not going to maintain it. What are you accomplishing?
In this case, sir, you are saving some state money, obviously, but of course it is falling on the owners of the properties that are adjacent to it.
1/10 of a mile.
Yes, sir.
So 500 feet.
Just about.
I just don't, I don't think I have wrapped my brain around this before. I just don't like the middle place. I'm not sure I understand it.
So just one other data point here that you might find useful is that, generally speaking, in the law, the requirement is that you have to serve at least 3 parcels in order to be a public way. In this case, it's just 2.
3 parcels or 3 people?
Well, 3 properties,
3 users.
3 users.
3 users.
3 users, but that's, I'm sorry.
No, no.
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you.
What
Thank you, Mr.
what
Lawson.
you're describing is if we're going to build a road, we got to have at least 3 users before we're going to accept it into the system. It can be dedicated, and usually it's dedicated to the county, and then the county at an annual meeting dedicates and hands it over to the state. But you're saying the state won't take it unless it has 3 users on it. Presumably, though, it's for a development that's going to get bigger than that, and there'll be more than 3.
That's correct, sir, but it also applies to rural additions and other ways to take roads.
Okay.
So is this like, I mean, Commissioner, does anybody feel like I feel? I just don't like it.
Love to see it on a map.
That would be helpful. Is there any urgency on this?
I don't believe there is, sir.
What if we didn't do this until September? Does it change anything? I just got to tell you, I don't like this, I don't like it. I don't like the system.
Mr. Secretary, could I
If
suggest?
somebody has a similar situation at some point, I mean, either if you're not going to take care of it, then give it to me, or take care of it. I mean, just, yeah, Mr. Lawson.
If I could, if we are going to follow your lead and look at this in September,
It's a board's decision, I'm just suggesting.
could we evaluate the option of just abandoning it and following the Secretary's thoughts, just give the easement to the, you say there's 2 property owners that would use this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then they would know what they're getting into, and they got to take care of it and so on.
I just see it coming where, and to your point, maybe this is 50 years from now, or 40 years from now, whatever it is. And we're, not our problem, if you will. But I don't want, it's going to happen. At some point, the road's going to need to be repaired. And they're going to come to us and say, repair the road. And we're going to say, no, we discontinued it. But if you want to repair it, then you have to file a permit, and you got to do this, and you got to do it the way we want. And they're like, well, I'm paying my taxes too. Why don't you take care of my road if it's your road? Why don't you take care of it? Now, if you want to give it to me, okay, then I got something. It's now my road, and I get to take care of it, and that makes sense to me. But the middle ground, I just don't understand that. I don't like it. So, Mr. Kaspers.
Yeah, just another comment following up on Mr. Lawson's comment. The other thing for this board to consider is, in these decisions, is by returning it to the landowners in some form, we also put it back on the tax rolls. I mean, we often, I think, don't give full consideration to the amount of impact on local jurisdictions that our right-of-way has as the non-tax-paying properties. So the added benefit in aggregate is we return more money to local jurisdictions.
Here's what we're going to do, folks. I'm going to remove it from the consideration today. I get to do that anyway. We're going to get a presentation at the next workshop meeting on discontinuance versus abandonment and how many we have and sort of what our history is and what we're trying to accomplish with that process. And we're going to look at that and make sure we think that makes sense. And then we'll consider this, whether that's September, October. As long as it's not urgent and we're not messing somebody up here, I want to get it right. I want to get it right. Everybody agree with that? Okay. Sorry, Robert. I should have dug into this earlier and I didn't do it. I apologize. Is the second one the same?
No, sir.
That's just a regular one. Okay. Let's go to number 2. Oh, action on addition. Okay. All right, Mr. Hofrichter, let's go to item number 2. Action on addition to the primary system of state highways, Route 288 in Powhatan County, located within the Richmond District. Sir.
Yes, sir. So Route 288 was constructed. This is the legal process to add it officially into the system. This is for about a 3¼ mile segment in Powhatan County.
Mr. Commissioner?
Mr. Secretary, as we discussed in the prep meeting, this is a cleanup action item that is close to 20 to 30 years old in its making. There was an oversight. What I'm being told, too, is that previously additions did not need to come to the Commonwealth Transportation Board, but this is a cleanup action item, and I believe we have less than 50 additional cleanups that we're still working through to be able to bring before the board. Again, significant cleanup. This is an action item. 288 has been under use for, I want to say,
Since 19, he told it, he said it
I
today,
didn't.
1992? In the
So-
previous presentation, I think we said 288 was built in 92?
32 years in the making to be able to add this back into the primary system.
The point is, what the commissioner said in his commissioner-like way was, we dropped the ball. That's the bottom line. We didn't do what we should have done, so it's been hanging out there. And what I asked him in our pre-meeting was, are there any others like, can we go make sure we're cleaning all this up, and he's working on that. So this is merely a sort of a technical thing that should have been done 30-some years ago, was not, we've been treating it as if it was, which is a different issue that we've discussed. But notwithstanding that, are there any further questions on this item?
Mr. Secretary, who has been maintaining the road?
We have. So yes, so now we're maintaining something that wasn't in our system. And we're going to discontinue something and not maintain it that is in our system. Here we are. Welcome to Tuesday. So we're going to work on that. This one's good, I think. So are there any further questions on item number 2? Hearing none. Mr. Davis, is there a motion to be made by you, sir?
So moved.
Mr. Davis moves to accept.
Second.
Mr. Laird seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to do item number 3, and then we're going to take a break for lunch. So item number 3 is action on commemorative naming at the request of Halifax and Charlotte counties of the bridges on east and westbound U.S. Route 360, James D. Haygood Highway in Halifax County, and Kings Highway in Charlotte County over the Stanton River, located within the Lynchburg District between Halifax and Charlotte counties as the Joseph D. Barclay II Memorial Bridge. Mr. Prezioso.
Good morning, sir.
Welcome. Hope you're well.
Doing well. Thank you, sir. I'm actually very excited to be able to present this to you today, and hopefully if with your permission, I'd like to venture away from the normal narrative. You've got your normal briefing package here.
Please do.
But what I'd like to share is that Mr. Barclay was one of my first supervisors when I came to VDOT over 30 years ago. And in addition to the fine things that are said in the resolution and the briefing package, I can share with you that Mr. Barclay was, without a doubt, an example of what you would expect of a Southern gentleman. Always a big smile on his face, always a kind word to share with someone. He taught me that I had an engineering degree. It was from his alma mater, Virginia Tech, so that put me on a little bit of a pedestal, but he told me that was a small piece of the puzzle. That in order to be a good VDOT field engineer, a resident engineer, you had to learn the needs of the people in your community. You had to learn the needs and the skills of your team to be able to deliver that. And for over 35 years in the Halifax residency, he did that. He developed a tremendous commitment and devotion to the communities in Halifax and Charlotte counties. You can see some of that in the briefing as the accomplishments that were done over those years. But he likewise built a bond of trust and love with his team there in Halifax, with pretty much all VDOTers, but especially those folks in the Halifax residency. And actually, it was one of his former employees out of that residency that kind of marched this initiative forward. So it's an honor to me to be able to present this for your consideration to name these 2 bridges on Route 360 at the border of Halifax and Charlotte counties in honor of Mr. Barclay.
Pretty darn special. Ms. Green.
I spoke to the Lynchburg engineers, and they all agree with the sentiment. It's quite an honor to have a VDOT employee remembered in this way. It was not just his commitment there, but it was in the neighboring counties. Charlotte County also did a proclamation and is sharing this honor, and it was respect for the fine work that VDOT does that he exemplifies. He also served on economic development boards and many other boards and committees, but he was very, very well respected.
I will tell you, one of the real pleasures of this job is the fact that we've got some really good people that work in the Commonwealth in transportation. And VDOT, is the big kahuna, if you will, and there's just so many talented, good people here at VDOT that do really great work. And so when you come in to do this job as secretary, like, you're just trying to sort of coach and push and pull agencies to do things that you want to do. And, I've been very blessed in transportation because I've got professional agencies with really, not that there aren't others, I'm not suggesting that they're not professional, but ours are really good, and they have really good people, and a long history of really good people. And frankly, we come and go, as the legislature likes to say, I think. We come and go, and so does the legislature. But the people who work in VDOT and the people that work at DRPT and the people that work in all the transportation agencies, including DMV and the port and the spaceport, they're the ones that make all this work, right? And we've got some really good ones, and it's just a pleasure, Robbie. It's really cool that you're able to present this on his behalf and somebody that means something to you. So thank you. So we have a resolution. Hoping we're going to have a motion. Much. Ms. Green moves. Do we have a second? Mr. Laird seconds. Is there further conversation? So as is our practice here, I would ask you to, if you are affirming your vote, to rise in a moment of silence for Mr. Barkley and to show your affirmation of this resolution. Very much. Well done, Mr. Barkley. All right, as I indicated, we are going to break for lunch now, and we will be back in about 45 minutes. This meeting is recessed. Thank you, Commissioner. Item back to order. Thank you all very much. Thanks to those who provided our lunch. It was great. Thank you very much. And our first item we're picking back up on the agenda is item number 4, Mr. Dudley. Action on the economic development access for New Kent City Center, Project Econ 063-063, located within the Richmond District.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Dudley.
Good afternoon, Mr.
Welcome.
Secretary.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good seeing you. Good seeing everyone. So our first request, I have two requests today. The first, they were both presented last month, so you should be familiar with the request. But the first is a request, as the Secretary mentioned, from New Kent County for the design of access to a qualified major employment and investment site. So as you know, an MEI site is a development which is expected to generate capital investment of at least $250 million and create more than 400 new full-time jobs. The project will perform an alternative analysis and design a 1 to 2 mile long, depending on the alternative chosen, 30 feet wide extension of city center court, which will provide access to 600 acres of undeveloped property at the New Kent Center Economic Development Site. The county has requested $650,000 in economic development access funds, which will be matched by $150,000 by the county, and we request the board's approval of the allocation.
Comments or questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
Secretary, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Mr. Davis moves. Dr. Smoot seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much, sir. Item number 5, action on economic development access for New London Business and Technology Center, Project Econ 009-911, Bedford County, located within the Salem District. Mr. Dudley.
Yes, sir. So this request is from Bedford County for the design of access to a non-MEI site at the New London Business and Technology Center. The design will improve the business park entrance at Mead Road and Route 460 and will provide for a 3/4 mile long, 24-foot wide extension of Mead Road. The county is requesting $200,000 in economic development access program funding, which will be matched by the county, a total of $50,000, and we request the board's approval of the allocation.
Is there a motion?
The Secretary move approval.
Dr. Smoot moves. Ms. Green seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Dudley. Ms. Pryor, infrastructure, item number 6, action on approval of the state of good repair prioritization process. Welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the board, Mr. Secretary, you'll recall last month the state structure and bridge engineer and I briefed the board on some proposed policy changes to the board's state of good repair policy resulting from a recent legislative change. The proposed changes would allow cusp bridges, which are bridges on the cusp of becoming in poor status, to be eligible for state of good repair funding, as well as the appropriate treatment types to be funded with SGR funds. And finally, the proposed policy changes also include the ability to increase the cap per locality for SGR local paving in instances where the revenues available exceed the amount possible to allocate to localities within the cap. And I recommend your approval of the proposed revised policy.
Any comments or questions? Is there a motion? Ms. Sellers moves. Is there a second? Second. Mr. Lawson seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. You know, this is, we sort of did this in a just straightforward manner, but this was an important thing we did and something the commissioner and his team have been recommending and promoting. And I want to thank the legislature and the governor for making this change because it's really in the best interest of everybody. So we worked together over a couple sessions and got this fixed up the way it needs to be. And so staff, all the pieces came together and worked the way it's supposed to work, so we're appreciative of the leadership of our staff and the help of the General Assembly and the Governor. Ms. Pryor. Action on FY 2025 20-2030 six-year improvement program transfers for May 18 through June 14 of this year. Ma'am.
Thank you. You should have in your packet a list of transfers provided to you for your information, as well as transfers provided that require your approval, and I recommend approval of the lists of transfers.
Are there any comments or questions? Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Sellers moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Smoot seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much, Ms. Pryor. Item number 8, action on addition of projects to the six-year improvement program for fiscal years 2025 through 2030.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. You should have before you a list of 33 proposed amendments to the six-year improvement program. 32 of those projects are the new SGR local paving projects in Hampton Roads District, now allowed per the revised SGR policy, and I recommend your approval.
So that's really fast, Ms. Pryor. What if we voted against it?
Then they would not be added to the six-year program.
You'd have to
We would
do some
money
work. You'd have to
sitting.
do some work.
Yes, sir.
I'm glad we added it.
Confident in the board's decision.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any comments or questions? Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Coleman moves. Ms. Green seconds. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you so much.
Thank
Mr. Heltzel, location and design. Action on limited access control changes for the widening of Route 28 Centerville Road from 0.1 miles south of Compton Road, which is Route 665, to 0.2 miles south of Route 29, Fairfax County, located within the Northern Virginia District. Mr. Heltzel.
Good afternoon,
Welcome.
Mr. Secretary.
Good to see you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. Mr. Secretary, I think you explained the context of the project very well. It's another phase of added improvements to this route of significance in Northern Virginia. We have a letter of endorsement from Fairfax County. It has gone through its environmental due diligence and public involvement, and the chief engineer has endorsed these changes on behalf of the project. And with your dispensation favorably today, we'll move on to the next phases of project development.
Thank you, Mr. Heltzel. Any comments or questions? Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Kasperitz.
Sorry.
Item number 9.
Yes.
A motion to approve the
So
Northern
moved.
Virginia District Access Control change.
So moved.
We have a motion, and we got Mr. Stantz giving us a second. Are there any comments, or excuse me, is there further discussion?
Forgot my colleague was in here.
Yes, I know. It's okay. It's all right, sir. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you, Mr. Heltzel.
Thank you,
Appreciate it
Mr.
very much.
Secretary.
Item number 10, Deputy Commissioner McGee. Action on authorization for the Commissioner of Highways to enter into a standard project agreement, a SPA, between the Virginia Department of Transportation and the Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission for the Interstate 64/Interstate 264 Interchange Phase 3A Improvement Project and future standard project agreements with the HR TAC related to the interchange. Mr. Commissioner, you don't look like the deputy.
Mr. Secretary, I certainly do not look like the deputy.
And
much
she's,
better
and
looking
she's
than I
quite
am.
thankful for that,
Yes,
sir.
absolutely. Members of the board, I'm stepping in for the deputy commissioner. She's on an important phone call for me right now. What you have before you is an action item to be able to enter into an agreement with HR TAC, just to be able, which is our standard project administration agreement that we have with HR TAC for the I-64-264 Phase 3 project, and I recommend your approval.
So, as I told the folks in the pre-meeting, this was my commute for 20 years, from my house to my office. So I'm well familiar with this intersection, and I'm really pleased to see it be improved, because it's one of those intersections where you might have a half mile to mile back up onto the interstate trying to get off, and that does all sorts of crazy things. Two major interstates coming together there, so it's a great project, and I look forward to it. Mr. Stant. We have a motion to approve from Mr. Stant. Mr. Coleman, I know, is seconding. I could feel it. Is there further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Thank you very much. John, I'm going to skip. You ready, John? I'm going to skip to item number 17, Office of the Secretary of Transportation, Action on Transportation Partnership Opportunity Fund, Project Allocation. Deputy Lawson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. I'm pleased to be here today to bring before you a TPOF allocation that's been recommended by the governor. You should have found the materials laid on your places over the lunch break. Just to kind of backset a little bit, if you recall, in the 23 session, there was some changes made to the TPOF legislation that permits the governor to actually direct monies to transportation projects that support economic development projects in localities based upon his acceptance of a recommendation from the Secretaries of Transportation and Commerce and Trade. This particular one that we're bringing before you today is from the city of Suffolk. The Secretary Miller and Secretary Merrick reviewed the application, or the proposal, I should say, from the city of Suffolk, and found that the benefits that project, that economic development activity would bring to be very significant to not just Hampton Roads, but to the Port of Virginia and the larger Commonwealth as a whole. What is being requested, or is being directed, I should say, is $30 million, $30.1 million to support the right-of-way and utility relocation work on this project, being referred to as Route 460 Road Improvement Project. The project is a total of $86 million. The city has secured the funding for the design work, and they have committed to funding the construction if other monies don't become available at the time in which we reach that point in the schedule. Today, in the audience, I've got several members, several individuals that would like to speak to this before the board takes action. And we have Senator Emily Jordan, I've got Mayor Duman, the city manager, Al Moore, and the deputy city manager, Kevin Hughes, here today. And I think, Senator?
Senator, before you speak, let me, one, thank you for your leadership here, and tell the board a little bit more about my involvement in this project and the administration's involvement in this project. And so a couple years ago, when this came on our radar, it was clear to us that the port, the most efficient port in North America, container port in North America, and one that is technologically advanced. And now, when we finish our hundreds of millions of dollars of projects there, we also have the deepest and widest channels. We're able to go side by side through this port, and so we expect it to continue to grow. And one of the things that it doesn't have enough of is places like this that can support it. And so this is a project that a developer from out of town came in. It's a spec project, if you will. They're putting their money where their mouth is. At the end of the day, it's almost $250 million of investment there that will not only bring good jobs, but also bring good support to the port and its mission. And these are things, these investments that this governor has been very focused on and has been a leader on in terms of economic development. These investments are exactly the reason that Virginia, part of the reason that Virginia was just named the best state to do business in the country again, returning to its top spot. And so you will be reading more about that, but we've invested in the administration, the governor's invested hundreds of millions of dollars with the legislature's strong support and help, because it's a partnership here, folks. Invested a lot of money into business-ready sites. I'm very involved in the economic development process as part of Transportation Secretary. I lead the infrastructure pillar for the economic development work there. And we've just been very focused on trying to prime the pump of Virginia to make sure it returns to where it rightfully belongs. And so this is one of the signature projects that we talked about for a couple years. And so the state's involvement in this is critical, but there's a huge outside investment and a huge impact into the senator's community and to the port. So with that, ma'am, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Secretary Miller and members of the board. First, it's an honor to be here and always in a good connotation when you want to be before such an incredible group today. First, I want to thank you for your leadership and the members of the CTB and especially Governor Youngkin for several reasons. Just because CNBC announced us being #1 for business is great. We're #3 for infrastructure, #1 for education, and you know, we're fighting very hard to workforce development, skilled trades to continue to keep that number up. And I know things like this are going to be a large part of that. But one of the quotes that CNB said, and I think it has a large part to do with the innovation of your leadership, the governor's leadership, and also the innovation that TPOF really is and what it can be for our Commonwealth, for projects that may be outside this, obviously, smart scale scope, but are focused on economic development in our future. CNBC's quote that I think truly put us there, and I think it's probably the work of yourself, the governor, and this board's work, where Virginia really shines is the wealth of shovel-ready sites the state offers for companies that want to build fast. Just the initial capital investment for this project is going to be $240 million up front, which is a drop in the bucket to what the total over $1 billion investment will be. But I will tell you this, anyone who knows Greater Hampton Roads knows that our port partners and so many in the maritime community absolutely direly need the upgrade in infrastructure. Portsmouth and Norfolk, while we hope and pray daily that they can grow more land, you know, they're a little bit landlocked with water, so that wish may not come true. The city of Suffolk is burgeoning and growing as one of the largest cities landmass in the entire Commonwealth, but we're also uniquely positioned at the confluence of 58 and 460, which combined together has more truck traffic actually than 64 that we're seeing as a direct result of the success of our port, which we're very, very excited about. When I've spoken with the governor and Secretary Miller about this opportunity, they recognize the importance of our future, and I know that the members of this board do as well, because I will tell you this, is that that port will only grow with careful and thoughtful decision-making, such as projects being hopefully approved like this. And without that, I would be very concerned about how we could grow our TEUs out of that port. So I want to thank all of you for your consideration. And with that, Secretary Miller, I would really love to turn it over to my city. I'm certainly proud of where I'm from, and having represented a district that is larger than the state of Delaware, I go from Virginia National Gateway to almost the inland port. So port is part of my business, and I hope to be here many more times in the future for exciting announcements and working with you. So thank you to each and every board member and Secretary Miller.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate it.
With that, I'll turn it over to the mayor.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Mayor, it's what a pleasure to have you.
Chip, good to see you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, all. Secretary Miller, Secretary Merrick, members of the board. I want to sincerely thank you for affording the city of Suffolk the opportunity to present our request this afternoon. At this time, I'd like to introduce our Deputy City Manager, Kevin Hughes, who will provide you with a brief overview.
Thank you, Mayor.
Good afternoon, Secretary Miller, members of the board. I believe you have a slide deck in front of you, so I've got quick walk you through 4 slides for you on this project. So as been mentioned, the project is called Port 460. It's being brought forward by a group called Matan out of Maryland. They have other developments outside the Richmond marketplace. The project here in the city of Suffolk sits at 460 and 58, a really exciting opportunity and a great location to either head west or head south and move product in and out of our port facilities. It's zoned and master planned for distribution, manufacturing, food and beverage, and those type of operations. At the current concept, looks at 10 proposed buildings comprising over 4.6 million square feet of space. That development is forecasted to be about $240 million at full build-out. 9,000 jobs are projected, $16 million in future state income taxes, and up to $28 million in future personal property taxes. Additionally, to highlight the significance and its impact to the Port of Virginia, at full build-out, it could represent, just this one development alone, an increase of 1.5 in volume percentage annually at the Port of Virginia facilities. The road, Route 460, if you're familiar with it, it's about a 58-mile stretch of roadway from Suffolk to Petersburg, and the photos on the right share what the current conditions are. As Senator Jordan, mentioned, we're seeing a tremendous amount of activity both at 460 and the 58 corridor. Both those roadways combined are now more than what you can see from a truck capacity standpoint at 664. 460 alone seeing about 2,400 trucks per day. That's projected to double by 2024. And again, the road conditions, I think, speak to the need to address 460, and that's why we're here today, and we thank you for your support. So the project that we're proposing, and you can see in blue, the Port 460 project, it's a 2.3-mile stretch of Route 460, but it also takes into consideration improvements at the 58 bypass. So we're developing a diverging diamond interchange and then a widening and modernization of that 2.3-mile stretch of 460 that encompasses the frontage of the Port 460 project. We are complete with surveying. We are working towards some pre-engineering currently. We'll be under full design by this winter and hope to be starting construction in fall of '26 with completion in summer 2029. We've also worked out a strategy related to funding. So engineering and design is already in place. This is a true partnership project. So the developer is providing $6.6 million to that engineering effort. The Port of Virginia has brought forward $1 million to assist, and the City of Suffolk's in for $1 million. So all in engineering is about 8.6. We are requesting the 30.1 for right-of-way and utility relocation through TPOF. And then we, the City of Suffolk, are committed for the construction of over $48 million to move this project forward. We're committed, we're aggressive, and we're excited about this opportunity. Mayor?
Before I take a seat, I want to thank some very special people. I want to thank, obviously, Governor Youngkin, Senator Jordan, Secretary Miller, Secretary Merrick, Deputy Secretary Lawson, where is he? Back there, who worked with staff diligently to ensure that our application did indeed provide the information that you would need to make a decision on this action. Obviously, the Commonwealth Transportation Board, the Virginia Department of Transportation, and last but not least, the Port of Virginia. Thank you very much for your positive consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I see Barbara Nelson in the back here from the port, anxiously awaiting. Mr. Lawson. Mr. Stant.
Secretary, if there are no questions of the city.
Mr. Stant has a question. Mr. Stant, can you use your mic, please?
Excuse me. Mr. Coleman and I had the opportunity to, some months ago, to visit this area. We did not know specifically about this application or this project, but what Suffolk is doing in that area is unbelievable, and this is going to be a great project. So
And I would tell you, as I indicated before, I had an opportunity to start on this project a couple years ago. I met the principals from Maryland and worked with the port and others to get here. And it's something we've been talking about for a couple years, and it sort of is one of our signatures of this fund. And this fund is one of those, it gives the governor and the ability to do something that is obviously good, that brings a lot of return, but there's not a mechanism to get it done otherwise. And so the General Assembly has given this authority to the governor with the governor's approval, and we're part of this process, to be able to allocate these kinds of funds. And this is a signature project that'll bring a great impact to Virginia. And so that's why we bring it forward. Mr. Kasperitz, and then Ms. Sellers, and then Mr. Paul.
Actually, two questions, Mr. Secretary. John, what's the fund balance in TPOF at this point?
The balance as of today is about $45 million, and the fund will get about another $35 million this year.
Okay, so we'll supplement it. We'll be over 70 at some point, and we'll take 30 of that for this project. I thought there were changes to TPOF that made it possible for the governor, with your approval, to make these expenditures without board approval. Is that inaccurate?
No, it's still, the board's still, it's sort of an approval, but we are more of an implementer. So the two secretaries recommend, and then the governor approves and sends it to the CTB for them to take action on. What changed was the amount and the time, and some things changed in terms of that authority. But it didn't, it never obviated the CTB.
So it specifically requires our approval?
We have to approve.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, the way the language is written, the governor is actually directing the dollars to this Commonwealth Transportation Board to allocate to the project.
For that purpose. Ms. Sellers.
Mine's more of a comment. These are really interesting projects. And when we're down for the governor's conference and our CTB meeting later this year in Norfolk, I know for when we were down there, my first year on the CTB, we visited the port, and that was very educational for me. So is there a way for, especially the newer CTB members, to go and visit the port as well, to see, because there's no other way to describe the port than to see the amount of business that's going on at the port. And then, then you can see why projects like this matter. I know it's something that in the Fredericksburg district, we see a lot of, especially along the 95 corridor, distribution and logistics centers. And when I talk to the folks back home, I say, well, if you know what the port's doing, you know why we're doing this. And as we widen that channel, it's only going to grow. So that's maybe a recommendation, if there's time in our schedule, to take some of the new members to the port.
I think we may be able to convince them to let us come see.
Yeah, I see she's here, so.
Perhaps, if we ask nicely.
Yes.
I will tell you, sort of anecdotally, somebody was at the port the other day, and they were up in the tower, and they were looking at the north yard, and they said, "Man, you must love that." And I said, "Why?" They said, "Because everything is like organized, and it just is automated, and everything's in its place, and it really is, right?" And what they have done to get to that stage is profound, right? And you go to other ports, and it doesn't look like that. And we didn't used to look like that either. We were like a well-oiled, machine. And you go to the other ports, and many of them look like organized chaos or semi-organized chaos. And it's just really nice to see what lots of people over lots of years have done to make it what it is. And we got to keep doing it. So that's what this is all about, right?
Gives context to the investment. The investment
Absolutely.
in the bridge tunnel, investment into projects like this, investment to our localities who are doing these things. So the city of Suffolk taking this initiative. Because this isn't easy. I've been on the Planning Commission. I've been on the Board of Supervisors. People don't always like these projects.
Yeah.
So.
I understand. Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I just wanted to add a few comments as someone who spent 50 years dealing with the port and why this is so very important, because it closes another gap. One of the things that this port, and I've been talking about it to this board and others, is the Achilles heel is we don't have captive audiences. And what I mean by that is we don't have the infrastructure in this state to where more than 60% of the business that the port handles originates outside of the Commonwealth borders. Almost 40% is dealing with the Midwest. And what does that mean? That means that we're competing with other ports for that business. An importer or an exporter sitting in Suffolk is not going to take their cargo to Baltimore, nor are they going to import it through Baltimore to get to Virginia and to enter into commerce. And it's so very, very important. Talking about a return on investment, I mean, the Secretary has said everything that needs to be said on that. But I just say that more of these projects in the vision of the governor to create this opportunity, the General Assembly, and Emily, I'll go back for several years, so thank you for your advocacy in this, because it's so important. It's our Achilles heel. We've got to find ways to get around it, and this governor has done a wonderful job, and with help of the Secretary and others, to recognize that we need to have property that's ready for development. We can't say to someone who wants to move here, well, it's going to take about 10 or 15 years, because that's going to automatically chase them to North Carolina, South Carolina, or some other location. So I just want to applaud Suffolk for having the courage to step out and invest in this kind of property. As Fred said, we went there and viewed it, and it's just amazing at what's going on out there. And so we need more of this kind of investment because it gives a huge return. There's statistics that I don't have it off the top of my head, but wouldn't have time to give today. But for every container that goes over that port, it means jobs and revenue for the Commonwealth of Virginia. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Stant. We have a motion. Do we have a second, Mr. Coleman? Second. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Suffolk, go team. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda, I believe, is item number 11. Ms. Joanne Maxwell, Governance and Legislative Affairs, action on approval of notices of intended regulatory action in conjunction with periodic regulatory review.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, that's a mouthful, but this is an item I presented to you last month.
What is all that?
And to put it in a nutshell, VDOT is seeking approval of the board and authority to submit notices of intended regulatory actions for 4 regulations of the board that are up for periodic review. Each of those regulations, as we were looking at the items, we determined that there are amendments that could be made to those regulations to either streamline those regulations or update the regulations. Accordingly, the most appropriate action to take at this point would be to file a notice of intended regulatory action. That'll initiate the regulatory change or amendment process. That if you all approve our submission of the NORA, it will undergo a 30-day comment period, and then we will proceed with the actual proposals to amend the regs. You all will see the proposed regulations before the next stage occurs. So bottom line, we're asking for your approval to file the NORAs.
Is there a motion? Is there comments or questions? Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Coleman moves. Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate
Chair,
it.
thank you.
Ms. Snyder, Right-of-Way and Utilities Division, item number 12, action on limited access control change related to Route 60 in Rico County, located within the Richmond District.
Yes, sir. The first
Welcome.
item I have today
Hope
is
you're
a
well.
request.
I said welcome. I hope you're well.
Thank you. Yes, sir. I hope you are too.
Thank you.
The first item is, as you mentioned, along Route 60 in Henrico County. It was initially brought to us as a request for limited access removal by a developer, but it was then forwarded by Henrico County on behalf of the Henrico County Development Authority. And they have requested a termination of the limited access control along Route 60 between Technology Boulevard and Elko Road. And the purpose of this is to support the increased opportunity for further development of White Oak Development Park. VDOT has reviewed this, and we recommend your approval.
Comments or questions? Mr. Davis.
Mr. Secretary, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second. Ms. Green seconds. Is there any further discussion? All aye? All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Number 13, action on limited access control change related to Interstate 495, Fairfax County, located within the Northern Virginia District.
Yes, sir. This is a requested shift in the limited access line, requested by a developer that would allow for construction and maintenance of a pedestrian facility. This will allow for a connection between the requester's property to an existing 14-foot VDOT shared use trail, which connects McGarrity Road to the commercial core of Tyson's. VDOT has reviewed this, and we recommend your approval.
Ms. Casperts.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Ms. Sells. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you, Ms. Snyder.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Item number 14, financial planning. Ms. Laura Farmer, action on authorizing the issuance of the sale of Commonwealth of Virginia Federal Transportation Grant Anticipation Revenue Notes, Series 2024. Ms. Farmer.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary and members of the board.
Welcome.
Thank you. This resolution authorizes us to move forward with the transaction of Garvey bonds not to exceed $140 million. We are still looking for approximately $137 million. Your package includes the drafted preliminary official statement, the supplemental to the master indenture, our continuing disclosure agreement, as well as the notice of sale as drafted. I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Are there any comments or questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve? Mr. Davis moves. Mr. Laird seconds. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Mr. Davis, you moved your head, so I knew you were moving.
You anticipated
I said you
well.
moved.
Yes, I did.
Thank you, Ms. Farmer. Appreciate it very much. Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment, item number 15. Margie Ray, welcome. Action on approval of federal safety performance targets for the calendar year 2025.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. Last month, I presented on federal safety performance targets and the process by which we were recommending with VDOT and DMV those targets, and we are asking for your approval today.
Any comments or questions?
Secretary.
Mr. Casperts.
I do have some comments, I guess in line with prior years. So I note that once again, the numbers and the performance measures are rendered with an apparent high degree of accuracy. 819 fatalities, 6,829 serious injuries. I guess the test I applied to most votes, or actually all votes taken on this board, is can I credibly support a position affirming or rejecting a motion? I regret to say that I can't. I therefore will be abstaining today. I actually think that the ultimate determination of these metrics is misplaced with this board. It is a highly technical determination that requires a good deal of information input. I just don't feel equipped to do it, so I will be abstaining, sir.
Anyone else?
Secretary,
Mr. Lawson.
to that, could you refresh, how do we arrive at the number of
All right,
fatalities?
let me back up.
Grab me also.
We did some of this in workshop.
Right.
So we are required to have a number, which they call a goal or a target. I think they call it a goal, actually, or target. And I hate that, right? Because I don't, like my, we're talking about deaths and serious injuries. And we can either set our own, or we can go to what a lot of people have done is go to the federal standard, which is 0, right? We're going to have 0 deaths and 0 serious injuries next year. We're going to have 0. And there's like, you just set the number you think or you want or whatever, right? We've taken the position of we're trying to, and there's lots of technical stuff behind this, but there's lots of technical stuff behind a gazillion things we do. we've taken the position that we're going to try to predict what we expect to happen, and then we're going to try to bend that curve. And that's been Virginia's approach for the last couple of years. I've never been one to sort of ascribe to the zero, because I think it makes us lose sight of reality. And while zero is what everybody wants, I don't see in our sort of world of reality in the next however many years, I don't know how you get to zero. I don't think it's possible. And so while it's laudable, the question is, does it give us, I think when we see the number every time, and I hate this number, and how do we, we want to bend it, we were at 1,000. How do we bend it? We've talked about this, 10%, 20%, 30%. So when I see that 800 number, or I see a 900 number, I hate it. And I see a zero and I like it, right? But I want to see what reality is, for me. This is my view. I want to see what reality is because I want to be reminded that we need to find ways to continue to bend that curve. And so the staff has come forward. They've told us what they think is going to happen based on all the things, and it's no perfect science, Mr. Casper, it's not even close, right, to your point. And so we're required to put a number out there. And we can pick any number we want, and it can be zero or whatever. What I've tried to do is say, let's pick what we think is real, and then let's work really hard to bend that number down as we work on it. So that's been our philosophy. And, any philosophy is, I'm not saying it's the right one or the wrong one. It's been the one that we followed. Is that fair?
Yes, Mr. Secretary.
Can you help me correct anything I said incorrectly?
I don't believe there's any corrections necessary. To Mr. Kaspritz's point, we are prescribed, like to the decimal place of the numbers that we need to submit. We know that there's a plus or minus value to all of that. So it's, we imply accuracy that doesn't really exist. But it is a data-driven approach. We try to be very systematic in how we deal with it and think about it, which then leads us to potential solutions down the line to help bend that curve.
And the solution part of this is the important part, right? So it's not just VDOT, it's DMV as well, and it's the state police, right? Those are three legs of that stool, and they all have to work together. At the end of the day, DMV is the Highway Safety Office, not VDOT, right? So they've got things they're supposed to be doing. And what we're trying to do, to the bending the curve comment, what we're trying to do is make sure that VDOT and DMV and the state police are all joined at the hip. And we know exactly what we're trying to do. We're all in concert. We're working on the same things to get these numbers down. And so the way the DMV spends safety money is part and parcel of all this. The way VDOT spends safety money is part and parcel of all this. And we're just trying to make sure that everybody that has an ability to impact this is sitting at the table saying, how do we bend these curves and make these numbers go down? And I don't know if what we've done is bent the curve or not. I know the numbers have come down, and we're going to keep pressing the same pressure, putting the same pressure to keep bringing the number down. And, if we do it for 4 or 5 years in a row, I'll be able to say, I could look back and say, I think we bent the curve, as opposed to, COVID got back to reality. Because we all know that the curve skyrocketed during COVID. And so some of that's just normal return, perhaps. I don't know. But that's what this is all about.
Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Kaspers.
Yeah, I'd like to just add one comment to your comments. General Assembly, I think, should be included in that list of participants in attempting to make our roadways safer. You listed VDOT, DMV, and you listed DMV, State Police, and of course OIPI. General Assembly plays a great role in what happens from a safety perspective on our roadways as well.
They certainly play, I was mentioning the administration's pieces. So, Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Ever since I've been on this board, I've heard a lot of conversation about trying to reduce those numbers of serious injuries and deaths. But after the last meeting, I talked to others, and I came to the conclusion there's very little under control of this body to which cause may be the cause of it. But what I am convinced of through that conversations and digging a little deeper is that VDOT's office is doing everything they can to use their best judgments to reduce. Dr. Smoot and I talked about chevrons. even near his property, that have created a situation where there aren't as many accidents with people plowing through his fences. Afton Mountain's another one. The presentation this morning, I learned for the first time of VSL. I think those kind of pilot programs, I call it a pilot, may not be, but I think that could be expanded in order to reduce serious injuries and deaths. So those are things we can control, and I'm convinced that the Commissioner's office is doing everything they can because they're serious. The Secretary is serious. I know that he's talking a lot about it, and so I'm comfortable. And I know in the regulatory atmosphere that I run a company, I know a lot of the government regulations, you got to check a box. You got to come up with some kind of plan in order to have them comfortable. So, you know, I'm not as concerned about, I like to see matrix and how we're going to do it and how we're going to achieve the goal. But I'm concerned, I am convinced after this last month that we're doing everything they can. And I compliment this commissioner and his staff for what they are doing under our control.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Is there anyone else?
Mr. Secretary.
Yes, sir. Mr. Lawson.
Just so I'm clear, so the federal highway directs each state to report these numbers?
We set a, I hate the word, we set a target or a goal every year, and then we tell them how we actually turned out.
Every state in the union, I would venture to guess, does not have a Commonwealth Transportation Board. So our Commonwealth has handed this obligation off to this body or assigned this body to
Yeah, I'm not an
perform
expert
this?
on the other states. I will tell you that in terms of the output, it varies from, as I told you earlier, having a philosophy of zero, which I applaud zero, but yeah, who makes that decision?
That's where I'm headed.
I think there's probably, I'm not an expert, but I'm not sure.
And historically,
we've always
I've been
done it.
here 2 years. I don't remember doing this before, but I guess we did.
We've always done this.
Okay.
Since I've been on the board.
And Secretary Miller, if I can just add, it is the Code of Virginia that delegates that responsibility to you all to adopt the federal measures, not just limited to
Yeah,
safety.
we didn't make it up.
No, that's helpful.
Right. We can just grab it. It was given to us. And it's appropriate. Listen, we're more on the engineering side, but we have a little bit of behavioral too. And DMV is very behavioral in education. And then the state police are the folks that help us enforce it, right? So we're really focused on this, and we're trying to make sure we work really closely as a team, those three pieces and others. You know, the state police continue to be handicapped by personnel shortages and not enough folks. So, you know, we're all working hard to get there. But these are the numbers that we think are the best numbers, and we've looked at permutations and statistical analysis of this. This is where we think we will end up. And it's a bad number. You know, any number is a bad number, but 800 and some people is, you know, but it's been 1,000. It's been over 1,000. So, anyone else? All right, is there a motion to approve? Coleman moves, Mr. Stant seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions?
Mr. Secretary, lacking information to make an informed decision, I will abstain.
Ms. Kaspertz. Item number, thank you, Ms. Ray. Item number 16, Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, Mr. DJ Stadler. Action on amendments to VPRA FY25 capital budget and consent to sale of the Virginia line. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, members of the board. In March of this year, you all approved the VPRA FY25 capital budget. That budget included $433 million that was intended to extend passenger rail from Roanoke to Christiansburg. At that point, I believe we all thought that that was too much money and also would take too long. So we went back to Norfolk Southern, our partner, and as I briefed you last month in the workshop, we came up with a much better deal that will conceivably get us to Christiansburg faster for a lot less money, and will also get us, instead of the Virginian line, which goes from Roanoke to Christiansburg, get us the Manassas line, which is something that, control of which would be very beneficial for Virginia and passenger rail. I briefed you on it last month, and I'm here today to ask for your approval of the amended budget, which adds no money to our budget, it just reallocates it, and also authority to sell the Virginia line back to Norfolk Southern.
Let me, before I ask for other questions here, you know, the previous administration launched the rail program in Virginia to be what it is, transforming rail, substantial change, right? We're making it better. That's what we're trying to do here. So when they entertained this proposal before, as you know, in the workshop, you learned this. The decision was made without as much information as you might want to have. So there's no engineering, no design, and we came up with a schedule and some numbers, and that became our reality, and the schedule didn't work and the numbers didn't work as we got into engineering design. And so we looked at all sorts of different options, how to fix it, how to make it better, and we looked at another site. We went that direction. We had tunnel issues and bat issues and all sorts of issues. And because of the director, both DRPT and VPRA, because of their work, we were able to get Norfolk Southern to reengage and have a different discussion. And the good part about it is it's not like we're trading one good one from another for another good one. We got a better situation in Christiansburg, and we have a situation that's better in Northern Virginia at the same time for the same money. So that's really good. And so I'm excited. You know, it's not all done yet. It is subject to due diligence and lots of work that we have to do between now and the end of August. If we, at any time, we can walk away and say, we're not going to do that, we'll revert to where we were, and we'll go from there. So this is approval to change that budget, but it could happen that we change again. But right now, we're in really good shape. We think this is all going to work just fine. We're working through the due diligence, and we expect to be able to close up this transaction at the end of the summer in August. That's what I would tell you about it. Are there any comments or questions?
So moved, Mr. Secretary.
Second. Like a good railroad person. We have a motion and we have a second. Is there further discussion? I think Dr. Smoot's going to call for the question.
Old.
Hearing none. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed, no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. The next item on the agenda is Mr. Coker. The new and improved Mr. Coker with
Sir, good afternoon. How are you doing today?
the winter look.
That's right.
Good to see. We missed you, Mr. Coker.
You did?
Was it the last meeting you weren't here, or was it the one before last?
I missed the last one.
The last one, right. And as I remember, your bids were going really well, and then the chief engineer stepped in. We had a couple problems last meeting, so.
You can't win them all, sir. I set them up as best I could before I left.
The chief engineer wants to have, he wants his time. All right, Mr. Coker. Welcome, and we're glad you're back. Item number 18, we've got some bids to review, so have at it, sir.
Yes, sir. Mr. Secretary and members of the board, I have 5 projects to discuss today in excess of $5 million. First up is Order 311 in the Lynchburg District, or excuse me, 315. This is a 2025 plant mix project on the primary and secondary systems in Halifax County. We received 1 bid. The low bid was $7.7 million from Adams Construction Company out of Roanoke, Virginia. It is within range, and I recommend award.
Comments or questions? Motion to approve, Ms. Green. Is there a second? Ms. Sellers seconds. Further discussion? Yes, sir. Mr. Kasperitz and then Mr. Laird.
Looking at this, I know that we have parts of the Commonwealth that are difficult to attract more than 1 bid. I'm not sure the geographic location of this work, but I'm surprised to see a contract of this size come through with a single bidder. I know that there's a limited range of plant mix contractors out there. Tell me why we ended up with 1, if you can.
This project is geographically located in an area that is, there's not a whole lot of competition in this area. This is the 3rd time that we've advertised it, and we received 2 times with no bids. So this was originally part of the '24 season, and by advertising it and awarding it during the summer months, off-season, if you will, we hope to get more interest, and we were able to get a successful bidder.
I guess I would ask if there are ways that we could repackage it to make it more attractive the next time we go out to bid on it.
Those are things we look into, and we try and advise the district moving forward.
You know, the other side of this, or the bumper here, is the within range, right? So the within range tells us that at least it's within the range that we would expect it to be, given what it is and so forth. So that's our way of balancing. We still don't like it, but that's our way of balancing. And you know, if it was way out of range, we might say we're not doing it. We're going to wait, right? But at least this one is within range, so we've deemed it reasonable. Is that fair, Mr. Coker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Commissioner, agree with that? Okay. All right, do we have a motion?
Secretary.
Mr. Laird had a question, I'm sorry.
And it speaks to the within range. This project is evidently 30% over what the estimated construction cost was suggested. So at what point is it out of range?
Mr. Coker.
So I believe the number you're referring to is the
Bratcher.
district estimate.
Yes.
We have a separate estimate, a evaluative estimate. The district estimates are set far in advance before they submit them to us. So the evaluative estimate is based on current pricing and is a more accurate, more recent estimate.
Mr. Laird, and we can workshop this again at some point, but Mr. Kasperitz was involved with a group of folks, including Mr. Malvin and some others. I think Senator Williams was involved in this as well when he was a member of the board. But we looked really hard at trying to make sure that our estimates, and we've got a couple different kinds of them, were giving us what we needed. And as I've said, if we continue to see things outside the range, there's a problem. And we saw a lot of that. We've been seeing a fair amount of that in asphalt jobs, right? In plant mix jobs. We've seen a bunch over the course of the time. And that tells us something, right? Either there's not enough competition or there's inflation we haven't considered, something's going on. So we work really hard to do these ranges, and we've spent a lot of time working with them over the last numbers of years, Mr. Laird, and we'd be happy to give you some more information on where we are and why we're, what we considered at the time. And Mr. Kasperitz can tell you a lot about it too, because he was deeply involved in it. But I think we're not perfect, right? We're not perfect, but we're way down that.
Well, I think the fact that it's the third advertising of this requirement speaks to the issue, but that's where
100%.
repackaging might make it more effective the next time around.
So to answer, first of all, Secretary, you're 100% correct. I don't think I can add a better response to what you just said. Mr. Kasperitz, we do repackage. We may shorten it, we may take something out, we may loosen up the maintenance of traffic on certain projects. The fact that this one, so when the projects come in, as chief engineer, I either accept them or I reject them. And so this one was rejected twice, and because of the cost and because we didn't have competition. So you're always trying to repackage or relook at it once you put it back out. This area is close to the North Carolina line. We just don't get a lot of, Adams is really the only game in town. And so we have a very tough time getting competition there. But Adams did bid on this once before, and we got a better bid price from them on the second time through.
And you'll know, and listen, we've talked about doing some of this ourselves, right? I mean, sometimes you got to create your own competition. But plant mix, as most of us, I think, have some understanding of, you can't do it in Northern Virginia and take it to Roanoke. It doesn't work like that, right? Your plant has to be where the job is, within a radius of 50 miles or whatever it is. It's not a long distance. And there is some way to stretch that, but it gets expensive and it's hard to do. So, You know, if we didn't have anybody in Southwest Virginia, I'd be saying maybe we need to go create a plant, you know, a plant mix plant. And we're not doing that, but I mean, at the end of the day, we're not going to, you know, if the Commonwealth is not going to be put in a position where we're paying way more than we should for something, we're not going to do that. Right? Anyone else? So I don't think we have a motion in a second. Did we? You had the motion. Okay, there's questions after that. Who gave the second? Did you give the second? I don't think you seconded it. All right, Ms. Green motions, Mr. Laird seconds. We've had questions. Is there further discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you, Mr. Coker. Next.
Yes, sir. Order 446 in the Richmond District. This is a 2025 plant mix project on the primary and secondary systems in Chesterfield County. We received 2 bids. The low bid from Allen Myers of Glen Allen, Virginia of $10.7 million was within range, and I recommend approval.
Mr. Davis?
Mr. Secretary, I make motion to approve.
Sellers seconds. There's been a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Order number L02.
L02 is in the Lynchburg District. This is a state of good repair bridge replacement project over the Stanton River in Charlotte County. We received 6 bids. The low bidder of WC English out of Lynchburg, Virginia for $22.2 million was within range, and I recommend approval.
Green moves. Is there a second? Second. Dr. Smoot seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Order number L23.
Order L23 in the Fredericksburg District. This is a road reconstruction project in Spotsylvania County. We received 6 bids. The low bidder is Ardent Company out of McLean, Virginia, with a bid of $5.8 million. This is within range, and I recommend approval.
Second.
Sellers moves. Mr. Davis seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Order number DB 126.
Order DB 126 in the Salem District. This is a design build project, part of the I-81 Corridor Improvement Program. This is exit 143 to 150 improvements in Roanoke and Botetourt counties. We received 2 bids. The best value bid came from Branch Civil out of Roanoke, Virginia, at a cost of $361.7 million. This was within range, and I recommend award.
Dr. Smoot.
Mr. Secretary, I'm going to move approval, but I also want to share, and check me on this, that this bid was about $70 million less than the next bid. So that's a significant savings to the I-81 project in general from what had been anticipated.
Outstanding. Thank you. And Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Mr. Coker,
Yes, sir.
you brought us 4 bids. They were all, 5 bids. They were all within range, and we voted for all of them.
Sir, thank you.
Nice job, Mr. Coker. Way to step it up. Mr. Thrasher. It's under your leadership, sir. Come on. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. The next item on the agenda is new business. I don't have any new business to bring to the board. I want to thank you all very much for the work that you do. Thank you for digging in here. As I tell folks, this is a real board, and by that I mean it's really a lot of work if you do it right. And so we really much appreciate it. We expect to be a full complement. Please keep Captain Byers in your prayers. We'll send him well wishes. And we will not have a meeting next month in August. We'll take the month off, and our next meeting will be in September. So y'all please be safe. Have a great day and travel safely home. And thanks so much for all you do. This meeting's adjourned.